Great to have so many people joining us from around the world. So we want to welcome you. We'll get started. We're welcoming you to the Girls Fighting Human Trafficking in the time of COVID-19. So my name is Ruthie Hanchett, and I'm going to be introducing our panel and getting us started today. We'll be hearing from young women who are advocates and activists that are engaged in the movement to end human trafficking. So today we're going to learn about from young people who are, most of us are based in the United States, but on opposite ends of our country. Some of our speakers are part of a student group that I get to help lead called Live2free, based out of Vanguard University in Southern California in the US. And others of our presenters are young women who are leaders in the World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition. A lot of us have never met in person, but we're united in our shared goals of ending exploitation and slavery and empowering youth to lead that. So today, each group is going to share some of their experiences and the lessons that they have learned in leading in this youth movement, especially during the global pandemic, and adapting to and even working with the unique constraints that we've all experienced in this past year. So we'll hear some stories. We'll share some lessons learned and tips for sharing with others. And then there'll be a time of question and answer at the end. So you will all have a chance to ask your questions. You can put it in the chat or unmute at the end and ask your questions. So we want to ask that for now, you please keep yourself muted as we listen to the experiences and stories of our panel. We'll give time for conversation at the end. And if you want to use the chat to encourage your speakers, let them know that you're listening and engaging, or ask your questions, we'll follow those and ask those at the end. So I'm going to get us started by introducing our first panel member, Allie Hurst. And Allie is the student president at Live2free. She is a third-year college student at Vanguard University, and she's studying communication and history and political science. She loves working to improve the lives of others and has already worked for a variety of nonprofit organizations, such as the Salvation Army, the Constitutional Rights Foundation, and the Jesse Rees Foundation. So she now works at the Global Center for Women and Justice at Vanguard University and is this year's student president of Live2free. And as she says, she's loving every moment of it. I am privileged to work with Allie. So Allie, I will let you go first.
Thank you so much, Ruthie, and thank you for that introduction. I love working with you too. Hello, everyone. In California, it's still morning, but I know elsewhere it is not, so I won't say good morning. As you've already heard, my name is Allie, and I am the president of Live2free. We are Vanguard University's anti-human trafficking student mobilization team. And that's really just a long way of saying that we are student abolitionists, we are peer-to-peer mentors, we are student educators. We are a team of college students that specialize in youth and young adult outreach. So Ruthie, if you want to go ahead to the next slide on the PowerPoint. One or two more actually. Yes, so we operate with the goal of getting our community educated on what human trafficking is, what safety looks like, and what we can all do to end this abomination to human rights. Now, something that's really beautiful about our work and something that is particularly relevant to our audience today is that almost every member of our team is a young woman. So in addition to fighting human trafficking as young adults, we are fighting human trafficking as young women as well. So next slide, please. Before the pandemic reached California, Live2free was a very hands-on organization. We were giving presentations in high schools across California and partnering with organizations throughout our area to talk to youth groups, classrooms, conferences, Bible studies, and more. We also spent spring breaks and summer breaks traveling to give presentations, going everywhere from the Inland Empire to Argentina. Our plan for our 2020 spring break from school was to road trip to Central California, and we already had an itinerary of high school presentations established. But then the pandemic hit California. So suddenly, all of our presentations were canceled. Our school moved all of our classes online, and we all had to move out of the dorms with only a couple of days' notice. COVID-19 had changed the scope of what Live2free was able to do, not only in our community, but in any community. When we realized we weren't able to meet in person or work with our community face to face anymore, we knew that Live2free had to adapt, and we needed to do it quickly. So these days, we host every event online, which allows audiences from around the world to join us. We partner with organizations across the country to set up webinars, Zoom meetings, recordings, and interviews, just like the one we're doing today with World Without Exploitation's Youth Coalition. These wouldn't be possible if we had to rely on in-person opportunities. So moving online actually helped us bring fresh faces to our audience and to Vanguard, and expose our fellow students to the experiences of people and the work of organizations around the world. We cater our new content to the new digital age, which youth are facing right now, and we address the realities of a socially isolated life when we talk about what human trafficking can look like. The reality is, traffickers prey on children who are lonely, who are isolated from their community, and who are open to digital socialization. That makes this current lockdown lifestyle an environment which practically breeds trafficking opportunities. So we knew that we couldn't stop our outreach just because we couldn't meet in person. Instead, we knew we needed to double down. The first thing we did back at the beginning of the pandemic was realize that youth are not educated in the very real dangers online. So we created a presentation focused purely on online safety. And I would like to now introduce my wonderful team member, Janessa, who is going to tell you more about that. Janessa Smith is a senior at Vanguard University, majoring in psychology and minoring in sociology and religion. She is one of our community outreach coordinators for Live2free, where she works to connect with communities to raise awareness and combat human trafficking. Janessa has a strong passion to fight for social justice, and one day she hopes to turn that passion into a career where she is able to advocate for victims of sex trafficking. Go ahead and take the floor, Janessa.
Thank you so much, Allie. That was a beautiful introduction, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here. It's such an honor and a privilege to be amongst all of you guys. Today, I will be talking about the online safety webinar, as Allie mentioned. And like she mentioned, when the pandemic first hit, it was really important that us as a team, that we identified what problems we were noticing as far as how the crisis was really affecting youth's vulnerability to human trafficking. So with the pandemic, we noticed that youth were spending more time online, as we all were, right? I think we were all glued to our phones because it really gave us that social interaction that we were missing while being socially isolated. However, as human trafficking advocates, we know that spending more time on virtual platforms can absolutely leave children vulnerable to online sexual exploitation and grooming, as traffickers use social media to reach out to vulnerable youth, as Ali mentioned. And so as college students, we have seen the potential firsthand for threat and online dangers. So as a youth-led team, it was really important that we used our platform to really raise awareness of this and educate youth on how they can stay safe online. So this safety webinar really addressed some of the dangers of human trafficking. It taught youth the risk factors of human trafficking and also how they can stay safe online from online predators. So it was a really great informative webinar for youth, and we actually had the opportunity to partner with a nonprofit organization called WTLC, who is located where we are as well, and they were able to do the parent version of this webinar. So they were able to teach parents, teachers, counselors, basically adults that work with youth, how they can approach this issue with kids and how they can also keep their children safe. And so It was a great informative webinar, as I stated before, and it really empowered youth. I think when we're talking about human trafficking, it can really get kind of scary for youth because it's very dangerous, right? And so when we're talking to youth, our main goal is to empower them, to reach out to their peers, their family members, to spread the word and to begin a chain reaction. And that's exactly what this webinar did. Now I'm going to pass it over to Allie again, and she's going to talk about our Fair Trade Fashion Show.
Thank you, Janessa. So, like Janessa said, I would like to now talk about Live2free's annual Fair Trade Fashion Show. Fair trade is a wonderful assurance that the products we buy are made by people who are paid fair wages, treated fairly at their workplace, and given the best opportunity to succeed in their communities. Now, many years ago, Live2free realized that it was difficult for students to understand the beauty of something so abstract. It felt like this arbitrary certification that provides assurances we would probably never see in person. So we decided to make fair trade tangible, beautiful, and exciting. We wanted to give students an experience with fair trade that they could see and touch and fully engage with. And this is how the Fair Trade Fashion Show was born. Our fashion show takes place every fall, and we collaborate with between 10 and 20 fair trade fashion vendors to collect the very best in local clothing, jewelry, and accessories. This clothing is sold in Southern California, but it comes from countries around the world like Haiti, Vietnam, and Nigeria. We work with dozens of student volunteers, from hairstylists to equipment setup to music, and then there are the models themselves. Every piece is modeled by a student who then gets the immersive experience of physically interacting with tangible, ethical clothing. They get to feel with their own skin what ethical choices that benefit other people instead of oppressing them, feel like. Now, as you can imagine, COVID-19 threatened to cancel the 2020 Fair Trade Fashion Show. There are few things more dangerous, if we're being honest, than sitting in a crowded courtyard, putting on makeup in a crowded backstage, or passing clothing items from person to person during a global pandemic. But because we knew it was important to keep our fashion show alive, even during a pandemic, we decided to shift our in-person one-night event to an entirely virtual celebration that lasted 2 whole weeks. Now, to help me explain what our new fashion celebration looked like, I'd like to introduce another wonderful teammate of mine and Live2free's current vice president. Sam Zahrin is a sophomore pre-nursing student from Vanguard University with the hopes of becoming a pediatric registered nurse. She is currently the vice president of Live2free and is very passionate about fighting for the end of human trafficking, as well as finding fun ways to partake in ethical shopping. She loves living in Southern California with easy access to snowboarding and surfing, her 2 favorite things to do. So Sam, tell us more about the virtual fashion celebration.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Allie, for that introduction. We are going to be talking about the new fashion celebration. So I was actually a transfer student to Vanguard, so I hadn't experienced what the Fair Trade Fashion Show typically was. But what I did know is there was high expectations and a high bar because it was a great thing that everyone looked forward to every year. So with that, we had to find a new fun way. And because we were virtual, social media was the first thing that came to our minds. So our social media challenge consisted of 2 weeks. And then we had our 3 webinars and our student models. So our social media challenges looked like week 1, fair trade. So we had participants either put on fair trade clothing they had or went and purchased it and modeled it and posted a photo of them in it. Once they posted that photo, they were entered into a contest and could win prizes. Not going to lie, we had great prizes from great vendors all over. We had spa gift cards, all sorts of Arbonne goodies, the Tote Project, And then for week 2, it was thrifted. So any thrifted items you had, or you could go to a thrift store and post a picture in those clothing items, and then also be entered in another contest when you could win Rib Company gift certificate, manicure and pedicure gift cards, and more Arbonne goodies. Within our 2 weeks of social media challenges, we had our 3 webinars. Ruthie, if you go to the next slide. Our 3 webinars were conversation on fair trade fashion, affordable fair trade shopping, and exploring local fair trade. Conversation on fair trade fashion looked like explaining what fair trade was, because maybe people had seen the fair trade label but didn't know what that meant. That meant people were getting fair wages for the items that they were making, and we are helping when we purchase those items. So then affordable fair trade shopping fair trade can be a daunting task, because when you look up fair trade clothing, the first thing that may pop up is a $120 shirt. But we were able to show all these different options and all these different stores that sold fair trade clothing, accessories, beauty products, all those things. And then last one, exploring local fair trade. We went to 5 different stores in our area and showed the items they sold and talked to the owners, and were able to show people that there are stores around us that you could actually go to. And it's so important in this time of the pandemic being able to support those small businesses and stores that are actually helping make a difference. So after those 3 webinars, we're going to go to our student models. This was such a fun project for me because we had been out of contact with anyone from school for such a long time. So we were able to socially distant come together and do this. What it looks like was having half of the students be fair trade models. So they were given $75 to go purchase fair trade items. And then the other half of the students were given $30 to go thrifting and wear thrifted clothing. Then we took pictures of them and posted them. And it was a really fun way for people to be able to see that their own peers were wearing these clothing items, and it was an easy way to do that. Then the last thing that was super fun and cool for people to see was the boys, because the boys aren't always modeled as fair trade, being advocates for fair trade and human trafficking. A lot of the times you see the women and the girls. So having these boys be excited, and honestly, they did a great job. All of their outfits, they did it themselves, and they had such a great job doing that. So altogether, our student models were just a really fun way to come together and advocate for fair trade shopping and show that to our students. Next slide, Ruthie.
Thank you, Sam.
Of course.
So, the fashion celebration was truly a fantastic event, but one of my personal favorite parts about it was the potential that it presented for partnering with our community. Our most significant partners were 2 local chapters of Seroptimus International, the Huntington Beach and the Newport Harbor groups, and I think we have some audience members today from those chapters. I have to tell you, working with them was an outstanding learning opportunity, and it was honestly incredibly fun. Seroptimus helped us advertise the events to our community and to their networks. They co-hosted our expert panel, and their members attended all of our webinars. They funded our prizes and the student models shopping sprees. They donated items for our giveaways, and after the celebration, they helped us mail the giveaways and the prizes to winners all over the country. Working with Seroptimus, I learned that partnering with others will increase the impact of your efforts 100 times over. And even better, it leaves room for you to constantly learn something new as well. In addition to Seroptimus, our final webinar of the series gave us the opportunity to partner with multiple local fair trade vendors, like we normally would have at our in-person events. We sent students to every corner of Orange County to give virtual tours of fair trade stores and shops and interview the vendors. Our tour guides opened Zoom on their phones, and they simply showed the viewers around, like you would with friends on FaceTime. Vanguard students and webinar guests were able to see the layout of the store, hear about how to find it and where to park, catch a glimpse of the products that each store offered, and meet the passionate people running the business. So even though we couldn't bring local vendors to Vanguard, we found a way to bring Vanguard students to these local vendors. And in the process, we strengthened our relationship with our local fair trade and anti-trafficking community. Now, going back to Sam, can you tell us more about where our audience for the celebration came from?
Yes. So previously in our typical fair trade fashion show, we had the local audiences from Orange County, and in this area, those were the people who were coming. But now we're able to go virtual. All of our webinars were easily accessible, and we're able to record them for people to see later. So our previous Fair Trade Fashion Week, it was limited to a local audience, but now we were able to open it up to a bigger international audience. So the new fashion celebration had guests and participants from all around the country, and we're able to see people from as far as Japan. This was such a cool way to see a blessing out of a really hard situation and be able to use Zoom as an opportunity to reach as far as Japan, which is so cool to be able to do that. So next, I'm going to hand it back to Janessa for race and human trafficking.
Thank you so much, Sam. All right, so as we all know, the Summer of Reconciliation really sparked much needed conversations on injustice happening everywhere. And so as advocates, we know that we can fight for social justice wherever we're at. And it's really important that we start by using our own platforms. And so as human trafficking advocates, as we are, and the Live2free team, we know that any person can be vulnerable to human trafficking. However, research shows that majority of those who are trafficked are people of color. So really using our platform to raise awareness of this was really important to us. So how did we start, right? The first thing that we did was really starting with ourselves. And that's with anything that you're advocating for. It's really important that you're leading with passion. So we wanted to put on this event not just because it was what everybody was talking about, but because it was something that we really were passionate about learning more of and raising awareness about. So for this reason, we spent a lot of time really researching this issue, and I think this is something that we should all do in whatever we're advocating for, because we always want to make sure that we're using our voice properly. And so with this, networking was so essential, and it was so helpful, especially with the pandemic. I think that one thing positive that came out of this was the ability to network with those that we normally wouldn't have. And so we actually partnered with the Black Student Union Club on our campus to put on this event, and we really addressed how the Black community is impacted in human trafficking, and we did this for Black History Month. So with this and with the networking, we attended a lot of different webinars and networked with Black survivors of human trafficking themselves to really learn more about the topic and learn how we can properly be a voice. And this is actually how we were able to meet the speaker of our event, who was a survivor, leader, and person of color. So she was really able to give us all a deeper perspective on how the Black community is impacted in sex trafficking based on her real lived experiences. So with this event, we were able to touch on many different topics like the White Slave Act, adultification, sexualization, and other vulnerabilities that continue to leave people of color at risk for human trafficking. So this was a really great opportunity for us to really use our platforms to advocate for the injustice happening to vulnerable communities. And with everything being online, we use Zoom just like we are right now, and we were able to reach out to a broader audience, like Sam was saying. And we had people tuning in from many different states in the United States. So this one decision to put our passion into action by choosing to speak up about the injustice was able to reach out to so many people, and it was truly inspiring for us to see. So now I will pass it on to Sam, who will talk about peer-to-peer advocacy.
Because we are Vanguard University's student mobilization team, we have to have an audience. We have to reach to our audience. So social media outreach and person-to-person outreach. Social media, we have to use this as our main tool because we aren't able to see our students. Our students are fatigued. They're over Zoom. They don't want to do it. So we have to find new ways to reach them. Social media. increase Live2free's social media presence because so many new students have never even been on campus. And it's the new primary way to reach out to our peers. So how we did that, we have to post often, we have to post on our stories, and we have to host giveaways. We need to have something that draws them in. We did recently a fair trade chocolate giveaway. It was an easy way for people to come on, have fun, tag some students, and for our team to be reached out to more people. Person to person. Person-to-person outreach, what it used to look like was having booths on campus, conversation as we were walking to class, talking to our professors. Now we have to use our own personal social media. For example, I would use my social media to repost Live2free's posts so that my friends who maybe haven't seen Live2free before are now seeing those posts. Next, having conversation over text. Texting your random friends or that new person you met in class, hey, we're having a meeting on Monday and I would love to see you there. Or hey, we're having this event. Or even, have you ever heard of Live2free? Just starting those little conversations that you aren't having anymore. And last, inviting long distance friends to Zoom meetings. Friends who live in maybe Nebraska or the other side of the state, or other side of the country, are now able to come to our meetings when before they weren't able to. So those were just fun and easy ways to use social media to reach our students. Next, Ruthie. Thank you. So our on-campus presence. Clearly, we're not on campus. So now what we have to do is send flyers over email instead of posting them on the walls, gathering members' phone numbers because we never run into them anymore. So when we post on social media, we can say, DM us if you're interested, and then we get messages and are able to give them information, add to our email thread or to text, and then telling professors about events. This is a big way to reach more people because our professors, not only do they have class with you, they have tons of other classes that they're able to tell their students about. And then lastly, the campus newsletter. This is a super easy way to reach everyone. They send this email out every single week and they will have our flyers at the bottom or a paragraph about what event is happening. For example, at the beginning of the semester, we had a What is Live2free? This event just described what our club is and what days our meetings are so people would come by and see what we're all about. So now we have reaching out to schools. A big part of our club previously was going to different high schools and talking about what is human trafficking and what they can do to fight human trafficking. So we this year decided to reach out to schools. We emailed a ton of them and we were able to set up presentations for us to do over Zoom. When we did this in person, those schools actually had our contact information. So this year we were reached out to by Fountain Valley High School and a few other high schools in our area asking to do a presentation, which we'll be doing next week, explaining what our club is and talking about human trafficking. So that is another way we're able to use this platform. Ruthie, if you go to the next one. And Ali, did you want to finish up there?
Yes, so just to wrap up the Live2free portion of today's presentation, I want to first thank Sam and Janessa for their input and leave you guys with this idea that when times change and circumstances affect your situation and what you're able to do with your community, you need to adapt and you need to look at what youth are facing and you need to change and get creative and be flexible. And if you do that, like Live2free was able to do over the course of the last year, you can see some really fantastic results. So now I'd like to pass it on to Caitlin, who's going to introduce World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition, and they'll give us their insights and some of their stories from the last year.
Thank you so much, Ali. So good afternoon and good morning. My name is Caitlin Macias. I am a youth activist and consultant working to advance gender equity. So in my role with World Without Exploitation, I serve as the Youth Coalition Chair, leading campaigns, organizing events, and mobilizing youth to end human trafficking and sexual exploitation. I was fortunate to come to this work at a very young age. In high school, I started a feminist group to empower young women to fight for gender equality. In college, I studied sociology and political science with a focus on globalization and gender. And after graduation last year, I began working with a philanthropist to fund programs to improve the lives of women and girls.
Hi everyone, my name is Tamara Aronson, and I also am a youth activist, currently receiving my master's in global development with a focus on gender equity. I first learned about anti-trafficking when I was 16 years old, actually while I was at summer camp. And I came back that summer and I realized I had found my mission, eradicating trafficking and all forms of sexual exploitation. It was then that I met Lauren Hirsch, who at the time was the director of anti-trafficking policy and advocacy at Sanctuary for Families in New York. We worked together. She took me under her wing, and she had believed in the power of youth activism. And together we had gone with other high school students, college students, and young professionals to lobby and advocate for anti-trafficking legislation. Actually, coincidentally, today is the 5-year anniversary of the first ever legislation that I lobbied for with Lauren passing in New York. So that was pretty fun. In 2018, after she founded World Without Exploitation, Lauren had the idea for a youth summit to give the next generation of leaders the tools and experiences to advocate and lobby for a world in which no one was bought, sold, or exploited. Lauren called me while I was a sophomore in college and asked me if I wanted to be a part of its formation. I immediately said yes. That summer, along with NOW, the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, Space International, and the Voices and Faces Project, we launched the first ever World Without Exploitation Youth Summit, a full-day event with 200 youth advocates. This experience solidified for me that this was the path that I was meant to be on. I've continued my activism to this day, and I actually was able to come back to this year's summit as a featured speaker.
Thank you, Tamar. So last summer, I was introduced to Lauren Hirsch, the National Director of World Without Exploitation, who pitched the idea of creating a fully virtual youth summit to educate and activate youth. Next slide, please. I was immediately drawn in. Over the course of a month, a group of talented and motivated young people from across the country met weekly to organize what would be an event that would actually change my life. The World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition's third annual youth summit featured discussions by movement trailblazers, survivor leaders, and activists in the anti-trafficking space, who spoke on a variety of topics such as sex trafficking, the impact of porn, prostitution and race, and the equality model, which Dahlia will cover later. We had over 700 young people present for the 2-day event. The enthusiasm and passion left me feeling incredibly energized for more. Shortly after the summit, a group of 15 youth from the steering committee decided to continue the youth movement to end exploitation by starting the World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition. Next slide. We built the coalition on the basis of 3 important pillars. The first is education, educating young people through our monthly events and meetings. Advocacy, advocating for survivor-centered policies like the equality model. And awareness, using social media and online mediums to bring light to injustices and exploitation that exists in our society. Although we've never met in person, the breadth of new ideas and commitment to these issues jumps at me every day on the screen. Zoom and social media has been the basis of our communication. COVID-19, however, has not stifled our work. Instead, it's actually amplified it. I'm so proud to stand, or actually sit next to these incredible movement leaders today who inspire me to continue the fight against human trafficking. The future is here. I will now pass you on to Maria Elisa Escobar, the social media director for World We Youth and a junior at Pace University in New York City.
Thank you for the introduction, Caitlin. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us today. We would be lying if we said that as a society, we did not live in a virtual world before COVID. However, what the pandemic has done is transform social media from a tool used for leisure to a tool used for change. When developing the World We Youth Coalition, we came to the realization that using social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok provided us with a digital space to connect with and activate youth activists through our 3 pillars of education, awareness, and advocacy. In order to establish ourselves as a reputable brand, we use specific fonts and colors to show uniformity, designated an area of focus, and most importantly, utilize hashtags that pertain to our focus to reach our target audience. Our Instagram page has been instrumental in spreading awareness and sharing educational content. Some of our recent educational campaigns include our Healthy Relationships 101, created to engage youth in the conversation for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Another great educational post was on the importance of language pertaining specifically to the sex trade. Next slide, please. For this, we discussed how language can prompt misleading sanitization and how the words we have and the words we use have the power to impact society. In creating these shareables, we aim to provide our followers with concise and fundamental materials that could be reshared or reposted and virtually circulated to the world. As our national coalition focuses on youth from ages 15 to 28, our team knew that in order to really grasp the audience and their attention, we needed to make a TikTok. This strategy was unconventional as TikTok emerged as a leading social media platform during COVID, and almost no other social justice organizations was utilizing the platform to advance their movement. Using popular trends, we now post weekly TikToks to spread awareness of our cause, such as this one. I think it's very vital to back around. That's right, on top of That's one of my favorites, and I can't lie, they are very fun to make. Creating a presence on popular social media platforms is incredibly important to engage new followers, but also to ensure that the continuation of important conversations in all spaces, both physical and virtual. Although the pandemic has prevented us from gathering in person, as Caitlin mentioned, none of us know each other, the power of social media was made evident through our #FreeZeffie campaign. Zephaniah Trevino is a 16-year-old sex trafficking victim who was wrongfully charged with capital murder. Zephaniah, or Zeffie, witnessed her sex trafficker murder her sex buyer. She has been certified as an adult and faces life in prison for crimes she did not commit. When hearing about this case, the World We Youth Coalition immediately led a call to action on our Instagram to spread awareness of Zeffie's case and shed light on this injustice. In addition to our social media campaign, the Youth Coalition's Education Committee, in collaboration with experts in the field, wrote an op-ed to generate national attention to Zeffie's case and inspire youth to get involved. The op-ed was actually published in partnership with Sway Media, the leading self-publishing platform for women thought leaders. This then fueled another advocacy effort on our Twitter with a 2-hour #FreeZeffie tweet storm to demand the Dallas DA to drop all charges against Zeffie. We successfully got the #FreeZeffie trending on Twitter with over 4,000 tweets generated in just an hour. The exposure that social media provides enabled us to grab the attention and support of celebrities like Jamie Lee Curtis and Seth Meyers, and made it possible to mobilize over 2,000 people on Instagram to get involved in this cause. Platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok have become an indispensable tool in achieving social justice because they deliver a direct streamline to an unlimited network of people and provide a virtual stage for anyone, even youth, to become activists and enact real change in their communities and worldwide. Our next speaker, Tamar, knows this better than anyone.
Thank you, Maria. Something that I learned during my time in college was how prevalent and dangerous information gaps can be when it comes to sexual exploitation. While I was in my junior year studying abroad in Australia, my school newspaper put out an article titled "Sugar Daddy Website Sets Up Sweet Deal for New Students," which highlighted this glamorous, sensational new way of dating called sugaring, a transactional relationship in which company was repaid with tuition payments, gifts, trips, or lump sums. But I knew what sugaring really was. It was a dangerous gateway into trafficking and sexual exploitation. Even more concerning, the article didn't touch on any of the potential dangers that have been well documented: stalking, physical abuse, rape, and even murder. After writing a response to the newspaper, I took to social media to share my concern. I got hundreds of likes, private messages from students and parents, and reshares of my posts and the letter, which you can see here. But I didn't feel like that was enough. People were now informed, but we still had to act. Through social media, I gathered dozens of students to write to the president of the university, as well as the Title IX office, to make them aware of the dangers an article like this could pose to the student body. I got an incredibly positive response and worked with the president's office to include more of a discussion on sugaring in our Healthy Relationships Week. In my personal life, friends would approach me asking to learn more, sometimes debating, sometimes for curiosity. And I saw firsthand the power of peer-to-peer connection and the power of the collective youth voice to make change. Next slide, please. So often, I find that much of my advocacy comes in helping friends and peers understand misconceptions around human trafficking. After my article came out, so many of my friends said that they never knew this was an issue or never thought that it could happen here. I wanted my friends, peers, and fellow students to be aware, to be active, and to be informed. Some of the most common myths I've heard are trafficking doesn't happen here. It only happens in the developing world, and it requires some sort of transportation across a border. In reality, trafficking happens everywhere, and it doesn't have to require any transportation. Any sort of coercion is trafficking. Also, that traffickers don't usually know their victims. They're usually pulled off of the street, when in reality, most survivors are trafficked by a romantic partner, a family member, or someone that they know and trust. Additionally, vulnerable communities are most likely to be victims of trafficking, depending on your race, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and homelessness. Women of color, LGBTQ youth are more often than not sold and exploited, whereas white, wealthy, educated men are doing the buying. Another perception I often hear is that full decriminalization is the best option. But with the supply and demand, the racial and socioeconomic power imbalances, it shows that it's not actually the case. We've seen in places like Amsterdam and Germany, where the entire sex trade was decriminalized, meaning pimps, brothel owners, and sex buyers, along with prostituted people, were not illegal. When decriminalization was implemented, trafficking actually went up, unsurprisingly, along with sexual violence, domestic violence, and gang activity. Dahlia, who's the leader of the Youth Coalition's college group and events coordinator, will elaborate on the supply and demand aspect of trafficking.
Thank you, Tamar, and hello, everyone. A core belief of World Without Exploitation and the Youth Coalition is that the implementation of the equality model, also known as the Nordic model, which is proposed legislation surrounding the sex trade, is an essential part of ending sex trafficking. For those of you who don't know, the equality model would decriminalize prostituted people while holding pimps, brothel owners, and sex buyers accountable for their crimes. The legislation came to be out of an understanding that there will never be enough supply, in this case, prostituted people, to fill the demand, also in this case, sex buyers. And that's where traffickers will move in to fill the heightened demand. Equality model legislation, which is already being implemented abroad in places like Sweden, Canada, and France, has recently been introduced to New York State through the Sex Trade Survivors Justice and Equality Act, and just 2 weeks ago in Massachusetts, through the Act to Strengthen Justice and Support for Sex Trade Survivors. You can sign petitions supporting the equality model if you wish to do so, in the links being dropped in the chat now. The Youth Coalition has now held multiple events educating young people on the equality model, namely on why survivors of the sex trade support it. Most recently, we held a Northeast-focused equality model event with a panel exclusively of survivors of the sex trade, which was deeply impactful, especially to hear from such a diverse group. Through a before and after survey the attendees took, we found that while 85% of attendees understood what sexual exploitation was before the event, 100% walked away understanding its meaning. We plan to continue these regional events so we can cover specific legislation and make it as easy as possible for attendees to walk away with action items to support equality model legislation in their home states. We're starting an initiative to bring small-scale equality model events to college campuses, starting with an event at Southeastern Louisiana University, where we will be launching a joint equality model social media campaign and an on-campus educational event if COVID permits. To give you a better understanding of how our equality model event and most of our monthly events are organized, we use Zoom and usually start with a guest speaker or panel and then go into breakout rooms by age group to discuss what we've learned. The age group idea comes from the structure of our leadership of our coalition, which is split up into the college group, high school group, young professionals group. Our breakout rooms during our events model that outline. Having our leadership and events being broken up by age group has been instrumental in achieving the reach the Youth Coalition has been able to, because our target audience when marketing our message and mission are youth like us. We're able to connect on an unprecedented level with our attendees because we are living at a time when youth activism has never been more powerful and prevalent, as I'm sure you've all seen. And we feel that passion in our breakout rooms and our leadership discussions for sure. Expanding on our age groups within our leadership, the college group, which I lead and Maria, who spoke about social media, is a member of, is specifically challenged by the fact that young people are also the movement leaders who wish to fully decriminalize the sex trade, which we oppose. So the work of the college group isn't just to draw people into the trafficking work, but also to change their minds, oftentimes introducing them to the equality model for the very first time. The college group's goal is to start a college delegate program where we will have chapters of the Youth Coalition on college campuses where the delegates will be able to educate their peers on an even more personal level than before. And lastly, I want to take a moment and give you all some action items to support the equality model and the work of the coalition, if you'd like to. The first being to follow us at World We Youth on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok to stay up to date with everything going on. The second, to sign the equality model campaign statements I mentioned earlier and Maria dropped in the chat. And lastly, to join us in our work to free Zeffie, whose case Maria also spoke about. If you're in the US, you can call the district attorney presiding over Zeffie's case to show your support. And for those of you who are international, you can email him. The link to do both is being dropped in the chat now. And I'm gonna finally give it off to Caitlin for some lessons learned.
Thank you so much, Dahlia. So thank you everyone for listening to our presentations. Allie from Live2free and I will now be sharing some lessons learned and tips from the work we've done during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first success of our project has been due to youth leadership. So all the ideas, projects, and events that we create actually come from young people themselves. So this has helped us engage with youth audiences in new ways and empower the young people we educate. So the coalition has also made efforts to have survivors on our leadership to ensure we're leading with survivor voices as well. And we're also looking to diversify our leadership to include more BIPOC and POC members as well. Our colleagues at Live2free have also done a similar model that prioritizes and uplifts youth voices. As a leader, I've realized the importance of building a strong team and playing off of particular talents and passions of teammates. So when creating the coalition, we sought youth with writing and communication skills, creatives interested in graphic design, and amazing public speakers to add value to our coalition. So we plan to continue to cultivate the talents of our leadership and our broader coalition to create groups of activists all vying for a common cause and mission, which is to end human trafficking. Although talent is important, I would say that the most important attribute we look for is passion. So if you have passion for justice, gender-based issues, equity, and equality, you can become an activist with the World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition. So for example, Maria, who's with us today, came into this work with only a small understanding of graphic design and graphic creation. And now she's actually surpassed us all and is creating incredible shareables for our social media every single day. So I would say drive, creativity, and passion are really everything that you need. So the thing I will leave you with is one of my favorite sayings, carpe diem. So I know it seems cheesy, but if you have to seize opportunities as they are presented to you. So share your ideas, seek out new partnerships with people that you've never met. Think big. You never know who's going to answer your email or your DM or come to your event. I'm here today because of a random networking call. I never knew the day I met Lauren Hirsch on a networking call would actually start my career in the anti-trafficking space. So I hope you are all encouraged to start changing your communities today. I will pass it on to Allie to share some more tips.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. First off, I cannot agree more with the lessons that WorldWeave has passed on today. And Live2free uses all of them to a really great extent. So now I'd like to leave you with the 5 things that Live2free has learned from doing youth outreach during a pandemic. Number 1, make it tangible. When we were considering ways to move our outreach and our events online, we knew that we wanted students to continue to interact with the issues in a tangible way. We wanted them to be able to touch, smell, and taste the fruits of ethical choices. So for our fashion celebration, we decided to continue to work with a limited number of student models. We mailed physical prizes and giveaways all over the country. Even now, we continue to offer gift cards and chocolate bars and jewelry with our events and our activities, because youth learn best when they're interacting with something tangible. So if you want to get the youth in your community engaged in the issues, you have to give them something tangible to work with. Number 2, stay flexible, adaptable, and creative. Live2free, as we knew it a year and a half ago, could not have existed in this entirely virtual world. And yet, here we are. We're thriving and we're reaching our community in new ways every day. When you stay flexible and you stay adaptable, you open yourself up to a world of opportunities. You also minimize the risk that unexpected events will bring your efforts to a standstill. The risk of human trafficking is thriving during this pandemic. Our efforts to stop it have to thrive as well. If youth have moved online, then so should you. If youth want variation from Zoom, think about how you can switch things up. Keep it different and diverse so that once you have their attention, you don't lose it. Number 3, meet the needs of the moment. The world changes at a faster rate right now than it ever has before. New technologies emerge all the time, and even our current technology keeps us updated on world events at a minute-to-minute pace. So the lives of youth are changing constantly with every day. To equip them with the tools they need, we need to adapt our approach to the problems that youth are facing right here and right now. Today, youth are facing intense loneliness. We have spent the last year isolated from friends and from our support systems. We have been pulled in and out of school, and we have watched the world change in an instant several times over. Mask mandates, racial tension, shifting science. The truth is, we need your help. We need each other's help. So to help, you have to look at what we are dealing with at this moment and start by addressing that. Number 4, plan with the goal in mind. We cannot make a substantial impact on the lives of others if we are haphazardly planning things without a clear end goal. As you plan your events and you coordinate your outreach and you talk to the youth of your community, just keep your goals in mind. Make sure that everything you do is taking one step closer to that end result you're hoping for. If you're hoping that kids won't be groomed by online predators, you have to teach them what online predators look like and how to avoid them. And number 5, collaborate with others. The world is full of passionate people who want to help others. Each and every one of you listening today is proof of that. We are not islands and we are not alone. If you want to make the impact of your work multiply before your eyes, partner with others. If you want to learn from someone who has tried methods you haven't tried yet, partner with others. If you want to build relationships and create a network of support for yourself, partner with others. And if you want to touch lives to a degree you couldn't have previously imagined, you need to partner with others. Collaborations are your best bet at changing a culture, shaping a system, and influencing a society for the better. When you're trying to make the world a better place, you need to work with others. So these are the 5 most important things Live2free has learned as youth reaching out to youth during a global pandemic. And I really hope you can take these takeaways and they can help you reach out to the youth and the young adults in your community and around the world, because frankly, the world needs your help. Now I'll pass it back to you, Ruthie, for questions.
Thank you so much to our team, Allie and Caitlin, especially for sharing your wisdom. I feel like what you shared are principles that we can all apply, whether we are youth, work with youth, or other areas of activism and seeking change. So thank you for sharing what you've learned and the stories you've experienced. Now is our time where we get to ask questions of the panel. It's filling my heart with joy to see all the gratitude and encouragement that is filling up the chat right now. And I know that already we've had mainly questions around how do we bring this message to the young people in our lives, right? People want to know how they can follow and be connected to these two groups that have shared. And so you're seeing on your screen right now, all of the social media, as the young people shared, the young women shared, social media is the way that we are connecting right now to our other youth, peer-to-peer, as well as to the broader world. So follow these groups, add them to your connections, like them, follow them, make sure you're connected. And you will see periodic invitations and opportunities for upcoming events, trainings, conferences, webinars, where you can learn more from these amazing young leaders. So please do that, add them to your social media connections. And then I know there were some questions about, can you speak to young youth groups? So Allie, do you want to take that and speak to that question? And then please, everybody, as Allie's responding, if you have any questions to add to the chat, do that. And then we'll give some space for unmuting and asking questions after.
Yes, so to the question of if we can speak to various groups, the answer is yes. So Live2free is available for both in-person and virtual presentations from any location. Well, if it's in person, it has to be local, but virtual presentations we can give from any location. We can also record interviews or panels or presentations in advance and send those to you. And if you just want to reach out and meet with us or talk to us about tips for your own youth outreach, you can do that. We're happy to help to pass on the lessons that we've learned, like I touched on earlier, but we specialize in reaching out to youth specifically in a peer-to-peer mentoring format. So if you have youth or young adults that you would like us to reach out to, please just send us an email or contact us on Instagram or Facebook, and we would be happy to do that.
I wonder, Caitlin, if you want to share anything more about reaching specifically to youth groups.
So I think Ariana actually put our email in the chat as well. So you can reach out to us and we can, facilitate any questions. And we have all our events listed on our website as well. So I can drop the link to that. And then also, follow us on social media. We post about our events. We're actually having an event in April 20th, about masculinity and involving more men and boys in the space. So I can also put the link to register for that as well. But we're just so excited to be here and thank you. And if you have any other questions, please let us know.
Okay, I see a question asking about access to videos. And I know for Live2free, a lot of our videos are on the Facebook page, on Instagram, links to those. We have at Vanguard University Global Center for Women and Justice a YouTube channel where a lot of those videos are recorded and saved. What about World Without Exploitation, Youth Coalition, any other additional ways to access videos?
So we have World We has our webinars listed on the website as well. Currently, we haven't uploaded any of the youth ones, but we will be uploading those soon. And yeah, just stay tuned for more.
Even this event is being recorded on Facebook Live right now, so we will post that and share it soon. I think that is one of the great things about the virtual world we are living in, is everything is documented, recorded, and can be shared later. So I'm looking at a question now. Working with families, one of the biggest challenges we run into is that their parents, convincing their parents that they're at risk, and also helping them realize that their children need to be made aware of those risks. We do see that sometimes where parents may have some concerns. The myth that introducing these issues, exposing kids and youth to information removes maybe their innocence or puts them at risk of even being curious and exploring. So can you, young people, talk about the importance of equipping other youth with information and empowering them in that process?
Yes. So from Live2free's perspective, this is actually part of why we've structured our group in a peer-to-peer format. We're talking to each other, to our fellow students, to high schoolers or middle schoolers that we're not that far from in age. So we're reaching out to our peers because sometimes parents do feel strongly about making their children aware of this. But we've also partnered with other organizations that specialize in reaching out to parents. So we do have experience presenting to parents as well and teaching them that the more their child is aware of the issues, the better chance they have at being equipped to confront the issues, to avoid them or to face them safely and to protect themselves. Because someone who is ignorant about, for example, being groomed for sexploitation online they're still going to get those DMs in their inbox that say, I want you to be I want to be your sugar daddy or something like that. You're not protecting them from all the dangers of the world by not telling them what is happening. You're leaving them more vulnerable. So even though Live2free is formatted to reach out peer-to-peer, youth to youth, we do also have experience talking to parents. So if you'd like us to speak to a group specifically for you, you can reach out to us for that as well.
I know World We has lots of resources. Do you want to share some of those, Caitlin?
Sure. So I'm going to actually let maybe Tamar talk a little bit about what she did with sugaring and peer-to-peer, and then Dahlia, what she's done with the college group and what we're trying to do internally with our leadership.
Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so there's been a bunch of different ways to get involved. I think that something that's been really important has been having conversations with your friends, with your peers, posting on social media. I think that sometimes people are afraid that it's not the in-style thing to talk about or to post about, or are afraid of internet backlash that you might get. But what I found is that for a lot of those negative comments, you're also getting a lot of reinforcement and people who weren't aware before. I had parents and students reaching out to me alike saying, I didn't know that this was happening. What can I do? What can I tell my parents, or what can I tell my friends? What can I tell my children? I know that my letter to the editor and my Facebook post were shared in my university's parents group. So there are ways to kind of build those alliances. And I think that it starts with having that peer-to-peer conversation, by talking to your friends about it, by making these conversations that are a little bit tougher not taboo. Because I think that once we normalize having these conversations about safety, about sexual exploitation, we're able to create a larger narrative and help share.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I would first go to is general advertising and messaging. Whoever you're talking to, if they're unconvinced that human trafficking or sex trafficking is an issue that could affect them, that can affect their kids, the people they know and care about, I would first think of what is going on right now that in popular culture, it's the norm to care about, right? If you don't care about it, right, you'll be outcasted in some way. And my thoughts, and this is, we've done some messaging around this, or proposed messaging around this in the Youth Coalition and the college group, is the recent Black Lives Matter protests and the resurgence of that movement across media, across the country, across the world. And so I think relating human trafficking, because it's a really intersectional issue, right? It touches on sexism, patriarchal norms, racism, transphobia, everything, every issue you can think of, that if you relate it to something this person cares about, as far as reaching out peer to peer, or even to parents, being like, hey, like, I know you were involved in the Black Lives Matter protests. I know that racism is an issue that's important to you. Human trafficking touches upon that greatly. It was human trafficking, sexual exploitation were built on racism and sexism and colonialism. And if you build these connections and really show the intersectionality of this issue, I think it'll show people that it's worth their time to learn about it, and not only to educate themselves, but educate their peers. And I saw a lot of questions about children, to educate their children about, right? Because if you're educating your children about the harms of systemic racism, human trafficking goes hand in hand with that. So it's an extension of it, and it's easy to explain from that standpoint.
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now, but I'm wondering, Janessa, you're in charge of reaching out to schools for Live2free. I wonder if you could share the power that comes with youth reaching to youth and that peer-to-peer connection, because I know parents are concerned about talking to their kids, and that is absolutely necessary and important. But what is the value of youth talking to youth?
Absolutely. I think there's such great value because we have experienced these dangers from social media firsthand, right? We get the DMs sometimes. We've experienced these things. So coming at it in an angle that's relatable to youth and not too like structural, more conversational, using language that truly resonates with youth is really important. And so that's one reason why we love working with youth as Live2free and reaching out with youth, because we find it to be very, very, very impactful, really raising awareness, because a lot of times youth really aren't aware of how dangerous it is being online, right? But when we're teaching them and we're empowering them to, you know, speak up and use their social media platforms in a healthy way, we find it to be very, very impactful. So we find it to just be really empowering to youth, and it's such an amazing way to use our platform as a youth-led team.
Well, we've got a few more minutes. If anyone would like to ask any questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask if you'd rather use your voice and that's more comfortable. How do these organizations get a hold of survivors? So I know World We has worked really hard to be survivor-led and informed. Why don't you talk about that conversation of what it looks like to, in a healthy, respectful, ethical way, engage and invite survivors as part of this movement and to include their voices as leaders?
Sure. So I came onto World We, just last summer. And so I think that a lot of the relationships that World Without Exploitation has built have come over time. And one of the things we did with the Youth Coalition is we actually had young people who came to the summit who were, survivors actually reach out to us and say, hey, I really want to be part of this youth movement. And, I've made a really concerted effort to, make sure to include them in our leadership. And then also whenever we have questions, just reaching out to them directly. And I think one of the important things is that we don't tokenize any sort of like survivors or even people that are from, different backgrounds. So that's why we're trying to make, an effort to include more diverse people on our leadership. And I would say one of the important things that I've actually learned recently is that, in this work, survivors come with, a whole load of trauma. And so you have to be, very respectful when you're reaching out to them and not, involving them in any sort of, speaking engagement or anything if they're not ready and don't feel comfortable, sharing their story, because survivors are actually experts. They're not just, sharing, their personal experience. And so I think that, World We has done a really excellent job to amplify the voices of survivors rather than just kind of like picking and choosing, what they have to say and their voices. And I think like, I've had a lot of conversations recently, and this is an ever, growing journey for me and for, our young people to learn, how to develop that survivor ally relationship. And so I'm just really excited to, continue this work alongside survivors in this movement.
I'd love to add to that, Caitlin, just briefly, because I think it's important to note that it's not about partnerships with survivors or engaging survivors, because World Without Exploitation has always had survivor leadership, and the equality model, which is a foundational part of World Without Exploitation and the Youth Coalition's movement, was built on the backs of survivors. Survivors started the equality model movement. So I think it's less about making those partnerships and more about anyone who's not a survivor should be completely aware of how to interact in a respectful way with those people who are not only their peers, but are really the experts here. We will all know so much less than they do, and they have through their experience, through their expertise. And I think it's really about checking ourselves at every step of the process and building this movement and being like, are we still survivor centered right now? Is diversity present in our leadership? Are we serving equity properly right now? So it's really about centering the movement in our work around survivors.
I love that, Dahlia. I had written down that we need to assume that we are already including survivors sometimes as well, right? As Vanguard University has moved towards offering and including and supporting more survivors through scholarships, through becoming more trauma informed as an organization, a place that's welcoming and safe and responsive to what people have lived through. And it's important that we make assumptions that we are not speaking to non-survivors and survivors separately, but we are all included. And we want to create the safe spaces where everyone is welcome and included and valued. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to look at a specific question about including men in the conversation. And I know World We just did had a conversation about men as leaders in this movement. And we have some awesome male leaders in our group too. So maybe World We, do you want to share about your recent event and how you are empowering men particularly to lead and have an important stake in this work?
So we're actually going to have the conversation.
We
were going to have it. It got pushed back, but now we're actually going to host the conversation on April 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And so we have 3 incredible panelists who are going to be talking about the issues. And I think one of the things that we have really decided to focus on is involving young men and boys into the movement, just because this is not just something that's happening to young women and girls. This is actually being perpetrated mostly by men in this space. And so without engaging them in this movement, we're sort of dead in the water. And we've kind of tried to make an effort recently to involve more men on our leadership as well. And I think these conversations are not, supposed to be chastising. Instead, we're trying to actually peel back the layers of healthy masculinity and have conversations about how trafficking impacts young men and boys. They can be survivors and victims, but they can also be activists. I think this is heavily a women-centered issue when it comes to conversations that we have. But I think, broadening it to include members of, the male community, LGBTQ, can really make a difference and move the needle. And I would say if, Maria, you want to talk a little bit about what else we're doing around the masculinity event or add anything?
Yes, definitely. So as our event gets closer, one thing that, as I mentioned, we use our social media to really promote everything we're doing and really highlight the conversations that we're having. So leading up to this masculinities event, we are in the talks of doing a social media campaign surrounding male allyship. So different graphics with different information, different resources, and they'll be posted in the days leading up to the event. So I actually saw a question about how to engage males in this conversation, how to start the conversation. And I think personally that would be a great graphic to post and, really do the research, talk to other people and, create a graphic like that and provide information like that, which is obviously going to be a conversation for the webinar and the meeting we're going to be hosting. But I think in providing it in this digital and graphic format makes it easier to really disperse and post on socials so that more people are exposed to these resources and this information.
I'd love to add to that quickly, just a topic we'll be discussing during the event as a way to bring in young men and boys. I think it's important to talk about how every day, the things that they say, comments they make, jokes that they make, really contribute to a culture that's accepting and compliant in trafficking on a daily basis. I think a lot of that has to do with rape culture, which has been, you know, a hot topic, especially with the Me Too movement a couple of years ago. So I think if you start those conversations with, and I think if you come to the event, you'll see how that happens. With, here are the things that I've heard you say, that I hear you and your friends joke about, comments you make to women and comments you make about marginalized communities that are really contributing to a culture that supports trafficking. Because it's not just the traffickers, it's not just the pimps, it's not just the sex buyers and the brothel owners who contribute to a culture that's complicit in trafficking. So I think it's about bridging the connection between everyday conversations and actions, and then drawing it all the way to, and then this is where trafficking occurs.
I think what Dahlia was saying kind of goes back to those myths that we were talking about earlier. All of these different assumptions, right? Trafficking doesn't happen here. Sexual exploitation doesn't happen here. The sex trade is very liberating and freeing and not damaging. It's all of these different things. They all exist they all beget one another. They don't exist in a vacuum. Same with college campuses. I remember in my first experience working in an anti-trafficking organization, we also focused on college campus sexual assault because they all beget one another. These all are surrounding the same issues, right? And so having those discussions, bringing that reality, bringing everyone back down and realizing that these are connected, that our words matter, our actions matter, our perceptions matter, that it's not just, and with Me Too, like Dahlia was saying, it's really become more prevalent, and it's not just about college campus sexual assault. It's not just about domestic violence. There, all of these forms of gender-based violence interact with one another and beget one another. And the more we normalize these conversations in every realm, the better chance we have at creating these allies.
Thanks, Tamara. So I just see one more question that was about the challenges of reaching into schools and having access to students in schools. I know that's something that Live2free has prioritized and is working on, because it is a challenge. Janessa, do you want to take that? Speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think sometimes people can be a little hesitant to talk about this issue in general, just because they don't know what extent we will be exposing children to. And so a lot of times what schools will do is request our content beforehand, just so that way they can see what we're talking about, and that way they can ensure that it is youth friendly. And most of the times when they see our presentations, either recordings or they view our content, they're more than happy to have us present.
That's great. Okay, so I'm going to give it one more minute if anyone has any more questions. Yeah, there's questions about age ranges. Live2free primarily reaches out to students in the junior high and high school ages, kind of 12, 13, 14 and up. But there are great resources available online, and even we'd be happy to share. I know we love the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children for especially really younger kids, and resources there speaking about these issues. Where's the live stream on Facebook? You have to go to the World Without Exploitation Youth Coalition's Facebook page to find that live streaming of our event today. Yeah, we've got it noted there. So we just want to say thank you to everyone that joined us today. I especially love this conversation at the end where we could answer some of these questions and dig in a little bit deeper. Our panelists, you can tell everyone loves you. They're so grateful for what you've shared, for the activism you are modeling, for the leadership you are exercising. You're not waiting for jobs and titles, but you're doing it right now, and you're reaching your peers and making a difference. And we're so grateful for the ways that you are leading in this movement. So thank you, all of you who have joined us. Don't forget to follow both of the groups on social media. We also have some documents posted on the agenda from the NGO CSW agenda site. You can go to the files for this event and find a few more documents to learn more. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to our panel members. I'm going to stop sharing and just so you guys see their faces, everyone's faces before you go, and the thanks and the praise from all of our members who've joined us today. Thank you for being a part of this conversation as young women are leading in the anti-trafficking movement. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.